Growing up in the White House is a uniquely transformative experience, and these former first children have gone on to lead fascinating, occasionally controversial, and sometimes tragic post-White House lives. When his dad moved into the White House in January 2017, Barron Trump was hesitant to be uprooted. Up until that point, the then 10-year-old had already been living a privileged life in Manhattan. But once the school year ended, he and his mom ended up making the move to D.C. In contrast to his older siblings, the youngest of Donald Trump's children was granted a little more privacy as he grew up. Now that he's older, though, he's received a bit more media attention, such as when he was spotted at New York University with the Secret Service in tow. In September 2024, his dad revealed to the Daily Mail he was accepted to a lot of colleges, he's a very smart guy, and he'll be going to Stern, the business school, which is a great school at NYU. He's a very high-aptitude child, but he's no longer a child. In January 2009, 10-year-old Malia Obama and her younger sister Sasha joined their parents in the White House after their dad was elected president. At first, she wasn't thrilled about having to move from Illinois to Washington, D.C., but she soon settled into her role as one of the country's most famous children. Her parents strived to keep her and her sister protected from public scrutiny, which included enrolling them in a private school until their high school graduation. Malia attended several public events alongside her parents throughout her dad's 8-year term, but as her father's time in the White House drew to a close, she was looking to leave the nest and lead her own life. She ended up enrolling at Harvard University, where she graduated in 2021. Over the years, she demonstrated a passion for the entertainment industry, having worked as a production assistant with CBS in 2014 before interning at HBO during her senior year of high school. In September 2024, she was in France for the Deauville American Film Festival, where her short film, The Heart, won the festival's Young Spirit Award.
Be able to have audiences watch your stuff as a young filmmaker, artist, is the moment that kind of shifts your work.
When 7-year-old Sasha Obama was thrust into the spotlight when her father was elected president, the media attention was mostly positive. For example, in 2014, she and her sister were among the youngsters recognized by Time magazine as the most influential teens of the year. Sasha graduated from Sidwell Friends School in 2019 and then went on to attend the University of Michigan. She initially continued to live with her family while taking online classes during the COVID-19 pandemic, but then she decided to transfer to the University of Southern California and move in with her sister. Sasha graduated in 2023 with a degree in sociology. In 2024, a Natasha Obama was credited as a casting interviewer on the Showtime documentary series Couples Therapy, with viewers believing that the Natasha in question was in fact Sasha. Chelsea Clinton was almost 13 when she and her family moved into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in 1993. She managed to escape media scrutiny by attending a private school and having a social life outside the view of the press. Clinton looked back at this time in her life during an appearance on the People Every Day podcast in May 2021. Referring to the Secret Service's constant presence, she admitted, "I used to be asked all the time, 'Did you ever run away?' No, I never ran away. I respect that they had a job to do. I wasn't going to make that job harder for them, and I wasn't going to stress out my parents like that." After her time in the White House, Chelsea went on to get her bachelor's and master's degrees, as well as a PhD in international relations from Oxford University. She also pursued a career as an author, writing inspirational books for young readers, and she became a New York Times bestseller with her book She Persisted: 13 American Women Who Changed the World.
We need to celebrate and amplify the stories of women who have made our world healthier, more equitable, more just.
Amy Carter was just 9 years old when her dad, Jimmy Carter, was sworn into the Oval Office. While she had 3 older brothers, there was a large age gap between them, so she lived alone with her parents. The president strived to give Amy as normal a childhood as possible by enrolling her in a public school and even building a treehouse for her on the property. While she may have maintained a picture-perfect reputation during her father's term, things shifted a bit when she went off to college. Shortly after Amy enrolled at Brown University, she garnered a reputation as a troublemaker after being arrested 3 times at political protests. The targets of her activist ire included racial segregation, apartheid, IBM, and the CIA. After her sophomore year at Brown, the school dismissed her over her incomplete coursework, though many believed that the real reason was her activism. In the years since, she's mostly remained out of the public eye, although she did appear at her mother Rosalind's memorial service in 2023. Susan Ford was 17 when Richard Nixon resigned from the presidency, leading her father, Gerald Ford, to be sworn into office and become the country's 38th president. Thankfully for Susan, this development didn't cause as dramatic of a shift in her life as it did for other presidential children. As she told People magazine in 2021, "I was a senior in high school, and the lucky thing is we lived in Washington, so I didn't have to change schools." A memorable perk for Susan during her father's presidency was that her senior prom was held at the White House in 1975, the first and thus far only high school dance to be held on the premises. In April 2017, she spoke with MLive about the pressures she faced during this time, as she admitted, "It was difficult trying to manage being a first daughter and school. My parents were adamant that school and your education came first, so if I had too much homework, it was, you're not going to the state dinner."
And sometimes I didn't want to go to the state dinner because I didn't like the entertainer or whatever.
When Susan's mother Betty was diagnosed with breast cancer, she took over as the White House hostess and advocated for early detection. In 1982, the Betty Ford Center was founded to help people dealing with addiction, and Susan worked on many projects alongside her mother. She later joined the board of directors, and in 2005, she became a chairwoman. When 16-year-old Luci Baines Johnson's father, Lyndon Johnson, was sworn into office following John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963, she became the first teenager in the White House since William Howard Taft's daughter, Helen. In May 1964, Luci told Life magazine, "I think my greatest responsibility as the daughter of a president is to be myself, and to be my best self." During her father's term, Luci eventually moved out and enrolled at Georgetown University's School of Nursing. She had to drop out, however, due to the school's policy against married students. She later got her degree in communications and became involved in her family's business. Luci revealed to People magazine in October 2021 that many of the first children have remained in contact through holiday cards and reunions at the funerals of loved ones. As she described it, "It's a fraternity of not just first children, but first families. There is a sense of, you've walked my walk, you know my history, you care. We had an opportunity to be an eyewitness to history, and it was the privilege of a lifetime, but the facts are, every member of the first family serves." When John F. Kennedy won the 1960 election, his daughter Caroline was almost 3 years old. The press caught many of little Caroline's moments on camera, including her riding a pony on the lawn of the White House. 2 weeks after her father was assassinated in November 1963, her mother Jackie moved the kids out of the White House. Caroline looked back on her time in the nation's capital during an interview with WFLA in March 2019. As she revealed, "My mother always said it was the happiest time in our life because our family was together."
Think that you really are brought closer because you're in this really unique situation together.
Caroline eventually went on to study at several prestigious schools, and after working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art for a time, she graduated from Columbia Law School. She maintained her privacy while working as a lawyer, and she eventually became the United States ambassador to Japan in 2017 before taking on the same position for Australia in 2022. As the only surviving child of her parents, Caroline has kept their memories alive and ensured that the country remembers what they stood for. Known by the affectionate nickname John, John F. Kennedy Jr. was born just 2 weeks after his dad was elected president, and then he was just a few days away from turning 3 when his father was assassinated. One of the most enduring images of the president's funeral happened when his young son saluted the casket. JFK Jr. maintained a much more public life than his sister Caroline. He worked as a prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and he was even named People magazine's Sexiest Man Alive in 1988. During an interview on ABC's Primetime in May 1992, Kennedy was asked about his father's controversial personal life, but he chose not to directly answer, instead stating, "I think the real question is whether or not, given the tenor of the times, my father would have gone into politics at this point." At the time, there were rumors about Kennedy Jr. possibly following in his father's footsteps and running for office himself. Sadly, his life story became similar to that of the senior Kennedy in a much more tragic way. In July 1999, when he, his wife Carolyn Bessette, and his sister-in-law Lauren were killed in a plane crash in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Kennedy had been piloting the small plane at night, and an investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board determined that the pilot's failure to maintain control of the airplane during a descent over water at night was the result of spatial disorientation. Factors in the accident were haze and the dark night.